All right, I think we all are connected now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar about the SQL opportunity on Azure. My name is Mauro Pimentel. I'm Growth Solutions Leader for Data and Insights at Ingram Micro. And I'm here with my colleagues from Microsoft, Mike Sheldon, that is the Cloud Solutions Architect for Data and AI, and also with my colleague Chucks, that is the Cloud Solutions Architect from Ingram Micro as well. I'd like to uh, make you aware that this session is being recorded. So the idea is for us to go straight forward with the content, leaving all the questions to the end so we can have a clean recording. But whenever you have a questions or comments, please drop it on the chat. We are monitoring the chat so we can answer and address all the questions by the end of this webinar. Today, we're going to explore, first of all, the opportunity of data and insights, understanding what is data and insights concept, and how can we take this opportunity through the data modernization and starting from the database migration. And then I will invite Mike from Microsoft to explain us a really urgent opportunity that we can use, that is the SQL end of support, so we can take and start from there to take this opportunity. And by the end, I will invite my colleague Chucks to explain you how can we from Ingram help you to go and get this opportunity, and which will be the next steps for you to take and enjoy the results of these opportunities. So first of all, we're going to understand what is this data and insights opportunity, what is the total addressable market that we can go for it, and then understanding how does this journey to the data modernization that is part of how we take this opportunity happens, and how it starts from the database migration, and especially when it comes to using Azure to take this opportunity. Then by following the explanations and the examples Mike will give us around SQL end of support, we're going to understand that there is an urgent opportunity out there, something that we can take and start from just to move the first opportunities. And then we're going to see the next steps about how to target the right customers we can talk to, and then how to use resources from Ingram to accelerate this, this motion. And talking about opportunity, I'm talking about something that is going, according to IDC, around $129 billion, just considering data and insights, workloads, total addressable market by 2025. And maybe you are asking now, what do you mean with data and insights workloads? What is related to that opportunity? So what is this $129 billion about? So if we consider every workload you can consume, especially the ones that are compatible with the hyperscalers like Microsoft, considering only the workloads or services around data, like databases, data lakes, data warehouses, and even services that are around analytics or that are touching data like machine learning, and even some of the artificial intelligence that we can apply over the data. So only considering those eligible services, we are talking about a market by 2025, a total addressable market of around $129 billion. Our main hyperscaler, especially Microsoft here, is also seeing this opportunity and making huge investments around that area, and already getting some revenue from customers that are moving and transforming, modernizing data structures to follow this journey. So you can see here some numbers that represents the revenue Microsoft and other hyperscalers are getting from that area, and also how much investments they are doing on that area and their share on the market. And even some specialized ISVs. Maybe you have heard about Snowflake, Databricks, MongoDB, that are specialized ISVs that works with data solutions or solutions that goes around data modernization, they're also putting a lot of investments and already getting a lot of revenue out of that area. As a matter of fact, the same um, study or same analysis from IDC identified that half of the organizations that were interviewed on that case reported that they have less than 25% of their data in a single place that they can make use of it. So although we are talking about databases, data lakes, and more modern services, half of those organizations have a very short amount of data really available for taking insights or generating value from the existing data. That's the reason more than 68% of those companies realize that they are unable to realize or to extract value from that data. And actually, this is happening because according to IDC as well, we are almost tripling the data, the amount of data being generated worldwide by 2025. This means that we are according to IDC, around 181 zettabytes of data in terms of consumption and data generation over different sources. And almost half of that will be stored in public cloud environments like the Microsoft Azure. Understanding those numbers, or look into those numbers and talk to existing companies that are planning to do or planning to work around that data growth, they reported that the big initial challenge on that journey that goes from bringing together all the data and modernizing these structures, actually the big initial challenge they have is the database migration. So although I talk about now data factory, big data platforms, or even advanced services like analytics, machine learning, we've seen a lot of news around data modernization or even ISVs working on that area. Actually, most of our customers are right now struggling with the very first step on it, that is moving the existing data to a single point or to a modern platform that will enable them to start working with that data and extracting value from that data. But what maybe most of them didn't know yet is that by just doing or just helping them, if we just help them to give this first step, that is doing database migration to a more flexible environment, or maybe using database as a service on cloud, by just doing this very first step that might look hard for them to do now, but we have, and you're gonna see throughout this webinar, how can we help you to learn and to adopt these technologies. By doing this first step, they are already getting results. They are already reaching some business outcomes. So what we're gonna see today is that, well, one of our biggest opportunities here is around SQL Server and SQL Database on premises. Um, Most of you have connected to this webinar already knowing or thinking about the SQL Server customers you have already, or potential customers to SQL Server. And not only SQL Server is a good and an excellent starting point of this conversation, but besides that, we have an increasing urgent opportunity that is becoming a challenge for customers that are with old versions of SQL Server, that is the end of support. So this is above the existing opportunity for SQL Server. This is something that we can take actions immediately and use the resources we have. For that reason, I invite Mike Sheldon from Microsoft to talk to us about specifically the end of support for SQL Server. Mike?
Great, thanks, Mauro. Appreciate the opportunity. If you would like to move to the next slide. So as we've been discussing, there's a variety of reasons why we want to look at migrating to the cloud and the benefits that Azure provides. It could be data center migrations. It could be capacity needs as we exceed potential capacity of what we have today. Another reason is software end of support, and that's what you see here. We do have some specific timelines and opportunity to work with our customers as they have deployments of SQL Server today that may fall under this end of support scenario. Specifically, we have SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2, which have already been past the extent of support. You see those dates here for January of 2023 and then October of 2023 and what it means for those specific versions. So if there's still customers that are running those versions of SQL Server, tremendous opportunity from a modernization perspective. But also with SQL Server 2012, the specific dates that we see there of last July and what it means for those scenarios and helping customers migrate and move forward with the opportunity of taking advantage of Azure to help them in those scenarios. And there's a couple of ways in which we can help and address that very specifically. So if we move to the next slide, we'll talk about some of the options that we have. First and foremost, like SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2, with SQL Server 2012, we have the opportunity to move those workloads to Azure to continue to get the extended security updates. So that would be what we refer to as a lift and shift migration and moving that into Azure to continue to do those. The extended support had been seen, and we saw in the previous slide some of the specific dates we want to keep in mind. One is already passed as it relates to SQL Server 2008, and then the upcoming date for SQL Server 2008 R2. So these are important aspects that we want to have conversations with our customers to see if they fall in one of these scenarios and think about different ways in which we can help them if they are in one of these situations. So as we move to the next slide, you can see a few of the different options that we have for customers that are running these workloads and how we can help them. The first one, as I've mentioned, is moving to Azure. What we refer to this often as a rehost or a lift and shift, if you will, where we're going to take the workload as is, typically running in a virtual machine, and move it to run in Azure under a virtual machine there as well. So you continue to get the extended security updates for those particular releases, as you see here. And customers have the ability of saving on the hybrid benefits, the Azure AHub benefits, which we'll get into in just a moment, a bit more in those details. From here, then you have the opportunity to modernize to a platform as a service scenario to help customers really take advantage of what everything that Azure has to provide. That could be moving the application itself to app service, could be moving the application, or the database itself to one of the Azure SQL scenarios. And when we say Azure SQL, we're talking about Azure SQL Database or Azure SQL Managed Instance. So these versions we refer to as evergreen in a sense that you don't have to patch or upgrade those going forward. Those are maintained from that perspective by Microsoft. So there is opportunity. And you can even work with customers through the various different tooling that we have to help make that assessment, whether a migration directly to PaaS from the existing deployment is an option for them. The other options are upgrading on-premise. If the move to Azure is not an option, there are opportunities to upgrade in place to the most current versions of SQL Server. You see the referenced here, upgrading the latest version with SQL Server 2019. Just recently, we've released the more current version of SQL Server 2022. So that could be an option for them as well. So if we talk about some of the other reasons that we want to move applications to Azure, as we go to the next slide, I'll talk about a few more of these scenarios. Aside from what we see just with the end of support for the SQL Server versions we've just talked about, a few other things that we want to consider and some benefits as customers move to Azure. First of which is potentially retiring technical debt. We've talked about the ability of upgrading and or migrating to a platform as a service scenario, or even moving the SQL Server workloads to a SQL Server virtual machine, we have the ability to introduce an upgrade to a more current version of SQL Server to take advantage of some of the improvements that the product has, whether it's performance or availability or feature set, creating scenarios of increasing the capability of the application. Perhaps it's easier or improvements in management and maintenance and other types of aspects that the product has. So I encourage everyone to look at some of the enhanced capabilities with Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, or even the newer versions of SQL Server, SQL Server 2022, which provides great integration with Azure, additional functionality from synchronization, from high availability and disaster recovery, as well as improvements in query processing and other scenarios that may benefit the customer in general in that aspect. So that's the ability of migrating and upgrading to the infrastructure as a service capability or the platform as a service with Azure SQL Database. And certainly the application and the database go hand in hand. So looking at Azure App Service or other capabilities that exist in Azure to address the application side of it. The other perspective is one of the reasons I mentioned earlier about why we might migrate to Azure, such as software hardware refresh, capacity needs, as well as cost management. And that's what you see in this next pillar is the potential cost savings by running in Azure. The benefits, and I'll mention this in a moment as well, the hybrid benefits, reservation of resources, the extended security updates as we move to PaaS environments, not having to do patching and management. And the other one is the infrastructure optimization, as potentially customers may have over-provisioned hardware or sharing resources in the on-premises data centers. Really, the ability of leveraging the monitoring capabilities of Azure and truly right-sizing the environment so customers can take advantage of really what they're using and most efficiently and from a most cost optimized perspective, leveraging the appropriate resources so they're getting the functionality and the performance and capabilities they need, but yet at the appropriate cost level. And then the last pillar we see here, improving security and compliance. There are a variety of other aspects within Azure to provide security, various different security controls, capabilities and functionality with Microsoft Defender, various different compliance certifications that allow a customer to really maximize their security footprint and their posture as it relates to security with a variety of different functionalities or capabilities built into Azure that they could take advantage of. So moving on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit more about that cost efficiencies. As we look here, just a brief comparison to running SQL Server in Azure versus other alternatives. The notion of leveraging the most efficient and cost-effective approach. So you can see some of those comparisons here. And then as we move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the Azure hybrid benefits, which is really the ability of leveraging your investments in SQL Server today through software assurance and leveraging those licenses and that investment as you bring those workloads to Azure. And that's really what we're speaking about here when we talk about Azure hybrid benefits, or what's often referred to as AHUB. So important point to consider there. And as we move to the next slide, we talk about some of the different options in which you can pursue acquiring the SQL Server resources with the three different options that you see here, going from leveraging software assurance and the AHUB benefits all the way through to pay as you go, which there's a variety of scenarios where that makes sense. Could be interim workloads, could be scalable workloads. There's dev test options and scenarios to consider there as well. So really providing great flexibility as you look at what the cost models would be in migrating to Azure, those SQL Server workloads. And as we move to the next slide, I just wanted to share some of the resources the team here has put together to provide some of the additional information that I've been alluding to that you can follow through with these links and these references that go into much more detail. on some of the different benefits that you get from AHUB, some of the different scenarios to consider as you think about the extended security updates that we've discussed, various different resources that you can use to engage with customers, to have discussions on determining the right path for them, as well as the opportunity and how to have that discussion and moving to Azure. Now, the last slide I want to talk about, and then I'll turn it back in just a few minutes, but as we move to the next slide, I want to talk about how do you go about getting started. And there's a tremendous amount of documentation on the Microsoft website that goes through the various different migration approaches and tooling and resources to really help you get into a specific level of detail. But I just wanted to summarize here for a few minutes the high-level approach. And there's really several different phases, if you will, that we want to consider. Assessing the environment, doing that discovery, and then actually going through and performing the migration. And then after you've helped customers migrate, then it's really the optimize or the running of that environment once it's in Azure. And I want to talk a little bit more detail on each of these. The first one is in the assess phase. Microsoft has great tools to help with the assessment. Some of those tools are delivered through Azure through what we call Azure Migrate. We have introduced tooling as well in a tool that we call, desktop tool we call Azure Data Studio. And via an extension in Azure Data Studio, you have the ability of doing inventory and assessment of existing workloads. These are great resources to help determine the landscape inside of a customer environment, understand what versions of SQL Server they have, what capabilities are being used, and help to determine the best target for the actual migration, whether it's a SQL Server in a virtual machine, Azure SQL Database, or Azure SQL Managed Instance. It'll highlight potential blocking issues that may need to be remediated before a migration. It helps determine some of the considerations from sizing if you capture performance information during the assessment. So there's great resources here to help in these scenarios so that you're not having to do this on your own. These tools also continue to improve and be invested in by Microsoft. As an example, in the Azure Migrate, there's a new business case analysis capability that you can, using this assessment information, help to put that business case together. So you can leverage that as you work with customers to make the determination as to not only what is the right target in the migration, what's the right cost scenario, but as well as helping to create that business case and that value proposition for them to consider as they look at that migration from that perspective. And then within this tooling, then these tools also help with the actual migration process. Here you see reference to upgrading more current versions, as well as migrating to Azure. We have the ability of doing either an online migration if the customer is in a scenario where they can take little downtime. We can assist in the actual migration of the databases themselves into the right target platform within Azure, as well as setting up an environment of synchronizing the data over a period of time. So that way, when the environment is set up, the customer is ready to actually do the migration cutover very quick as the data is already there, ready to go, very minimal downtime as you make that transition and repoint the application to the new data platform in Azure, or potentially offline if that's not something that the customer is interested in and they can take a little bit longer downtime in order to do that data movement and the cutover all at once. That can be done with these tools as well. So again, within Azure Data Studio in combination with Azure Migrate, the SQL migration extension allows you to perform these online and offline migrations to the target platform. So those tooling and resources are there to assist you as well. And then once you get to Azure and you have that application up and running, successfully migrated, Then you want to think about optimizing and then running the workload in Azure. And we refer to that as the well-architected framework. Within the well-architected framework, there's really 5 key pillars that we refer to, and those are reliability, security, cost optimization, operational excellence, and performance efficiencies. And really through these 5 pillars, and there's a tremendous amount of really great documentation that go through the various different levels of detail and concepts and considerations in each of these. Now that your customers are running in Azure, you have the ability of maybe introducing additional reliability capabilities that were potentially cost prohibitive or just weren't implemented before. Now that these additional services in Azure can provide. Same thing from a performance efficiencies, leveraging components such as Azure Monitor, perhaps, to help get better insights into the performance and right sizing of the application. So if they need to scale up, maybe for seasonality or as the app grows in usage, they can really identify the right scale considerations, or maybe even scaling down based on the appropriate use case and really that cost management and cost optimization scenario. Leveraging the pillars and components that I referred to earlier around security, maybe taking advantage of some of the additional services or scenarios that Azure provides to help increase that security posture that perhaps they didn't have before, or maybe newer requirements as their business evolves. So great scenarios there. Again, I just wanted to touch briefly on that information so that you all are aware that these resources, these assets are there, and some of the high level considerations as you work with customers and begin to embark upon the actual migration scenario. These phases of assess, migrate, and then optimize will help you as you go through that process. So with that, thank you for the opportunity and the time today. Merle, I'll turn it back over to you to continue the discussion, and I'll be here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike, for this clear explanation about the SQL Server end of support and the alternatives. Maybe you are now thinking that, okay, Mauro, I understand the size of opportunity on the market. I understand that there is a trigger that we can start from when talking to customers, but definitely I don't feel ready to get in that level of conversation, or I don't know how to start, how to do the next steps, and maybe I need help on moving forward on that opportunity and going and get it. So uh, I'm gonna start talking about how can we help you to get this opportunity, starting from the very basic targeting, how to select the right customers to talk to, and then after that, I will invite Shucks to explain us extra features, resources, services we can make use from Ingram. There is a good, or better than that, an excellent starting point, so we can define the right targets or right customers to talk to, especially about end of support. There is a document from Microsoft called Cloud Asset File. There is a spreadsheet from Microsoft well prepared that includes the data from customers that we are talking to, and especially selling SQL licenses, and especially um, identifying from those customers that are maybe on renewal time, but actually many of them could be on end of support. So we can help you to, if you're aware of how to do that yet, we can help you to go and get this file, because Microsoft helps you to get access to that information that is related to your customers. And then you can find within this file, within this set of data, different types of customers. The number one priority, the end of support, that is the one that we've been seeing so far. And also different customers like the just simple SQL renewals, or even customers that are just regular SQL customers. That is another kind of a conversation we can have. For each one of them, we can have some goals or can have some path to start this conversation. So just to give an example, from the end of support, we can help you to develop or to establish a process of this conversation flow with your sales team. So identifying and filtering the customers from that file, having like an intro call, like a script you can use it, but mainly some scenarios, calculations you can use on this discussion with the customer to show them the advantages that just Mike told us about how to extending the support or using this opportunity to move to Azure and start using more modern services while keeping or giving extra time so the customer can upgrade the services. And there are many conversations, not only about end of support. Maybe you say, I don't have too much customers on that area, but I definitely have customers consuming SQL Server licenses. So there is also a path that we can develop together with you that will select regular renewals for SQL Server, and we'll have a little bit more complex conversation that will drive them to calculate and compare the existing costs or existing infrastructure facing the advantages of having this on cloud, even if it is just a managed instance, just moving to cloud, but actually trying to test it out and seeing, or at least to evaluate the possibility of moving to platform as a service and then getting the best of cloud optimization. And even for regular SQL Server customers that say, I'm not willing to move to Azure, my database, I will keep the database on premises. But maybe you are not aware that we can use cloud or Azure services to expand the possibilities of existing SQL Server, like giving high availability for this server, read-only replicas on cloud so they can balance the workloads and using cloud just for consumption of data, or even applying tools from cloud like monitor, logs, to improve the security and efficiency of the existing database. So there are many approaches we can use, even for customers that are not willing to move the entire database to cloud or not ready to do this movement. The most important is Ingram can help you to understand the paths you have available according to the cloud asset file, and then establish a real process and conversation flow so you can get closer to this customer with a really attractive uh, purpose. With that said, I invite then Shaks, my colleague, Cloud Solutions Architect from Ingram, to explain you what else we can do to enable you to make you ready for talking to those customers. Please, Shak.
Thank you, Mario. So we've talked about what the opportunity is on Azure. I'm here to say, like, as far as the partner enablement goes, we have here at Ingram multiple resources that can assist you from throughout the whole life cycle of trying to win this opportunity with your end customers. I, for one, I'm a pre-sales technical resource here at Ingram, and I'm focused on the Microsoft Cloud Platform Azure. And I'm here in terms of from inception, whether it's doing the discovery to uncover your customers' requirements, whether it's trying to scope out an exercise in order to provide cost estimates, and also assisting in providing best practice recommendations. Also, we can assist from a pre-sales technical resource in architecting and designing possible solutions, leveraging Azure services. Okay, next slide. Okay. So here are some of the certifications or training parts to our partners. Pluralsight is one of the online learning platforms that you can actually purchase as a partner or reseller through our cloud marketplace. And this slide here is just basically showing some of the courses that, you know, as a sales associate, you can probably consider or it's recommended to like take so that you can be able to effectively have those conversations. With our support as a pre-sales, we can also come in as well, discuss with your end customer, do a discovery. And if it's something where you don't have the technical bandwidth or bench and you want our services team to do the work, we have a professional services team, and we'll talk about some of the service capabilities that they have as well. Okay, next slide. Yep, and this is another certification training path more for like architects or pre-sales engineers within your company who wants to upskill when it comes to data modernization, understanding what some of the use cases are in the on-prem world and how some of that migration works going into in Azure. Next slide. Yeah, and so like I mentioned, let's talk about some of our service capabilities. So when it comes to our services capabilities, we here at Ingram, as Mike had mentioned, some of the different areas you assess your environment, you migrate, and then you optimize. So we can assist you at any point from the inception where you're going to actually just do a data discovery, right, to understand what that data estate looks like, what that landscape looks like. And then we can come in and also do the migration as well on your behalf. We on the pre-sales side, we have free resources to you to leverage us. If it's something where you have the technical bench, we can come in and actually assist you in a POC setup or setting up like the Azure Migrate tool, which is one of the tools that you can use to do a discovery and assessment within your customer's environment. In order to be able to understand what that data estate looks like. So yeah, so we can provide those services to scan that current data technology that are in use, identify the opportunities for modernization and migration to the cloud. So when it comes about the modernization assessment, we can evaluate the different methodologies for migrating, right? Because you can migrate either you can move your existing SQL Server on-premise machine in a lift and shift mode to the cloud, or you can modernize it by actually leveraging some of those past solutions like Azure SQL or Azure managed instance. And then we'll also come up with a migration plan. So once we have done that assessment, we'll help draw out the migration plan, keeping in mind a well-architected framework that will also account for cost optimization, security, reliability, high availability, and all the 5 different pillars that have to do with a well-architected framework. So we'll typically come in, we'll establish that landing zone that will accommodate those on-premise migrated workloads, and we'll make sure that it's in a well-architected framework. So we do have services around assessment, migration, and also like even if it's just a separate component where you have already existing workloads and you wanted to just us to now come for a phase 2 and do a cost optimization for that in order to be able to reduce costs for your end customer, we can our Ingram Services professional services team can provide that as well. Also, when it comes to data consolidation, we have services for consolidating data from different sources. So if the customer has different disparate data systems and they want to all consolidate that into Azure SQL managed instance or running on SQL in Azure, we can help support that so that way it will now be like a single access point for all the technologies in that. When it comes to also the data insights and analytics planning, we have a bench of even subsidiary companies like CloudLogic and BRLink that can help with some of that gathering of your clients' business data based on their metrics, and then they will help provide some of those insights for the different departments or stakeholders that are interested in it. Now you have all these your data estate within Azure. You can also take advantage of innovative services in applying best practices for like automation or continuous improvement of the business insights, by using the native Azure services for machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we have different service capabilities at any stage of the throughout the life cycle of trying to acquire the project that we can come in and help you out with, whether it's from a pre-sales perspective, just to have those conversations, do a discovery, or if it's to actually do the work on your behalf, leveraging our Ingram our professional services team. Okay, next slide. And this is just a sample output of what the typical assessment and discovery will look like. There we can use a tool called Azure Migrate to do an assessment of that environment. And then the output would typically be a report to kind of tell you ways you can optimize and what workloads that would need some further configurations, in order to be able to migrate easily into Azure. So this is just sort of like a footprint. It can take 1 week, 2 weeks, up to 6 weeks, just depending on what the data estate looks like. Okay. So what are the next steps? So Mario had mentioned we can assist you in getting like a targeted file to target your end customers. That way you kind of know which of your end customers are running SQL in your on-premise world. So we can help you get that right target audience. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and our sales team will help you with the preparation of how to go to market to those end customers. Well, we'll kind of fine tune the talk track to meet that specific end customer's requirement. And then they can also pull in us from the pre-sales support to kind of help with those conversations, uncover what the requirements are, help provide you with cost estimates that you can put some numbers in front of your customers, and also help with some of the POC implementation in your environment. If it's something where you need our professional services to do the work end to end, they are available as well. They will typically, based on the requirements that we, the pre-sales, provide to them, they'll typically provide you with a statement of work, and then you can take that, brand it into your own, and mark it up as you see fit. Also, they also allow you to shadow them while they are doing the implementation, so that way for your next or subsequent customers, you're able to actually go and do the work on your own, if you so choose. Okay, next step. Next. Yeah, this is just an optional link here that will be included in this deck when it's going to be sent out. Basically, it has different use scenarios or talk tracks around leveraging to your customers around leveraging Microsoft data platform, in order to reduce your cost, and also how to also sell some of the Azure data solutions. Next slide. Yeah, I think that's, you can go to the next one. Yep. So call to action. So our Ingram sales rep, your dedicated Ingram sales rep, IS sales rep, will be getting in touch with you, and then they can also provide you that data that was mentioned that shows your targeted end customers. And then once you've identified a set of customers that you would like, that this will be a good fit for them to move into Azure, then we can come in. They can pull us in as a pre-sales resource, or our professional services team can come in and assist you with that process of actually getting them seeing that opportunity through from end to end. Okay, so with that said, I just wanted to wrap up and just call out that we are here to help you throughout this process. If it's something where it's your first time setting up a data and insights practice, our sales your sales rep will reach out to you and have those conversations with you and see where your gaps are. And we as Ingram are the brand behind you, and we can fill those gaps either from a pre-sales or professional services standpoint to help you take this opportunity forward to your end customers. Okay.
Fantastic.
Yep.
All right. So thank you so much, Hux and Mike, for the explanations. So as a call to action is really to get in touch. If you see this opportunity, if you want to take over this and use this opportunity to increase your sales and revenue, and using especially end of support, we can help throughout all the things we have presented here. And with this, we'll wrap up all the content of this and webinar, and with a call to action for you to get in touch and to run this pilot with us. We're going to assist you throughout all these steps, so then you can take all the benefits of this approach. So I don't know if we have any questions, but anyways, I would like to thank you for joining this webinar, and hope to see you on the upcoming ones. And if we don't have any questions, just thank you for the time, and thank you for participating.